A few months ago, my partner and I bought a new house, and with that, it was time to move my workshop from my parents' garage into this space. And basically, this video will tell you exactly how I went about it. I'm Kurt, and this is Corso Workshop. This is my new workspace. It's amazing, honestly. I've never had such a large workshop to make projects in, and I'm really excited to get started and start making projects, props, leatherworking stuff to show you guys on video. And basically, the first thing that I needed to do was get it up and running. Since this building was pre-owned, there were a bunch of hooks and nails on the walls which had hanging stuff on them. I didn't need them, so I started by removing them. As you can probably see, this space, this is the washroom, the highest floor on the house. It also has a small kitchenette behind me, which is awesome. So I wanted to capitalize on the space which was already available, all the cabinets, all the shelves. And basically I made use of them by filling them up with different tools and devices and items which I use during my projects. In some cases, such as the spray cabinet, I needed to remove the door so that larger toolboxes can fit, which can hold some of my larger paints and basically makes it a little bit easier to access stuff on the go. It was very important for me to take my time when doing this. Essentially, I wanted to have everything within reach and everything easily accessible. However, also I needed everything to be in the right place. I filled some of the cabinets with the stuff that I need. Essentially, one of the cabinets was filled with adhesives, glues, tapes, the sort of thing that I use very often and I want within reach. Also some solvents and that sort of thing. Another cabinet was also filled with basically resins, stuff for prop making, mixing implements, and also electronics, which are very useful for prop making as well. So I wanted to have everything in one place, like for the different kinds of projects which I may use. It also happened that one of the cabinets had a glass front, so it was a good opportunity to put some miniatures behind it. It's just a temporary place for these, so I don't intend on keeping all my miniatures up here, but at least until I'm working on them, it would be nice to see them, and also in a cabinet which also has some lighting in it, which makes it look really cool. Naturally, the wall behind me, where the tool wall is, part above it basically needed to be a little bit more decorated, so I decided to hang up the board, the piece of plywood board, which has different stickers from different makers, which I collected in the 2018 Maker Central Fair. If you talk to any maker, whether they are an amateur or a veteran, you will notice that one of the very first things which a woodworker or anyone who owns a workshop might probably build or procure is a workbench. There's no exception for me. In fact, one of the very first things which I built back in about 2016-2017 was a very small workbench which has two legs and attaches to the wall via anchors. Now, in the old workshop, this used to hold my belt sander, the desktop belt sander, as well as the drill press, and this is no exception once again. I decided to carry it with me from the old garage, from the old workshop, and use it here. It has a little bit of a sentimental value. It's the very first project which I built. So yes, it definitely has a lot of potential and a lot of use over here. As I said, the workbench has two front feet and attaches with anchors, so the first thing that I did was align it to the wall, mark the different holes that it needs to anchor, drilled 4 holes into the wall and anchored them using long anchors to make sure that they are nice and secure against the wall. And I can assure you that's not going anywhere. It's pretty sturdy. Basically the construction is very simple, but it is built in a way which is very similar to this workbench that I'm going to show you very soon. And essentially what it is that all the load goes into the vertical legs directly. So any horizontal part won't have any load on them. Basically, I needed to do that first to start getting things off the floor. Once that was done, I started to clear the rest of the workshop. There was a large table here, which I didn't need in here. It's going probably to be featured in a future project because the surface is almost completely ruined. It's basically particle board which has sagged over the years, and I need to get rid of it and replace it. But for now, it's a good spraying surface, or at least a temporary workbench on the outside if I ever need to work outdoors. So I started getting everything out with some help and started to clear the room. With the rest of the floor cleared up, or at least mostly cleared up, I decided to start building the workbench, the pièce de résistance, as it were. The whole construction for this workbench is very easy and very simple. In fact, the only joints that I used were a lap joint and a butt joint. Now, a lap joint is basically a joint where you have two mating pieces of wood go face to face, and basically they're screwed in together or glued together. A butt joint is when you have a face grain connecting to an edge grain. All the force going from the top of the surface going down is always going to go through the vertical pieces, the legs. I started by using 2x4s, the only components for the frame of this workbench, and essentially what I did was started to measure all the different lengths, different legs, the long 2-meter pieces to support the surface, the braces between the legs, etc, etc. And once that was done, I marked them clearly and cut them with my chop saw. To make the lap joints was a very simple task. I basically marked out the areas where the two pieces of wood would touch. I glued that area. Once I mated both of the pieces together, I drilled holes, countersunk them so that the screws would lay flush on the surface, and then drill in screws to attach it together until the glue dries. Really and truly, it is the glue that is holding the whole piece together, not the actual screws. The screws help, of course, but once the glue dries, basically the two pieces are bonded together and they will almost never come off. The only kind of different joint that I used was for the middle set of legs. Now for that I used pocket holes. I know that they're very controversial and a lot of people have a lot of mixed feelings about them, but I personally enjoy them a lot for the very simple reason that I'm a little bit of an OCD freak, and having lap joints which were not symmetrical in the middle, it would have driven me nuts, even though it wouldn't be visible at all. So what I did was I cut shorter joiners between the two legs. I used a pocket hole jig, drilled the holes, glued the edge grain, which is not going, the end grain is not going to really hold a lot of glue anyway, but I put glue anyway over there, and then just held them together with the long pocket hole screws. Once the lateral side pieces, the leg structures were finished, I decided to connect them together with the two long pieces of 2x4s, which are 2 meters long. And basically, once they were drilled in using a butt joint, I measured the distance to find the middle of the whole strut so that I could attach the middle set of legs. With the basic construction of the frame complete, the only thing that I added after that off camera were two struts going, floating from the two long pieces around between the legs. The idea was twofold. First of all, they will have better support for the surface, not that they will have anyway, because the surface is very thick, it will probably never bow and sag. However, the second idea was that in the future, which has been a bit of a dream of mine, at least an idea of mine, is to cut these struts which are running along and introduce drawers in them. So that might be an interesting take on it in the future, and we'll see if we manage to do it. I managed to stand up the whole table frame, and basically I decided to start working on the surface. Now initially I was going to use a 1/2-inch plywood sheet, which was going to be a mistake. In the previous workshop I had 5/8 of an inch, and for some reason I forgot the thickness that I used and I ordered a 1/2 inch. However, when I was at the lumber shop, I saw this amazing piece of wood which is called a Tulip-board. Now a Tulip-board is something of a new material to me. I am quickly falling very much in love with it, even though it is a little bit expensive. I think it was about circa 80 euros for a sheet, and the sheet is about 244 centimeters by 144 centimeters, which is about the same size of a plywood sheet. Obviously it's much more expensive than plywood or MDF, but I really like the look of it, and it's an inch thick, so really it can take the blows of leatherworking, of prop making, and it's really sturdy and it really ties the whole project together. It really matches in color as well to the 2x4s. The way I went about it was that I wanted to have it flush, obviously, to the different sides. So I started by laying the Tulip-board on top, and aligning it with the front edge, I drilled holes, countersunk them, and drilled screws in. For the surface, I never use glues because I like to have the option to remove it in the future and replace it if it gets too dinged up or too dirty, or maybe I find a better material for it. So I always want the surface to be replaceable. Now, once I aligned one of the sides, I had to go around with the circular saw and cut off the excess. Once that was done, I also added more screws and countersunk them, etc., so that they lay flat. For the last edge, which I decided to be a hero on, I wanted to cut it off, I wanted to trim it off using my Japanese pull saw. Never again, it was such a hassle to do it. I clearly underestimated this material. It's not as easy to cut as a 2x4, it's denser. I did manage to cut it in the end, but it took me a solid 15 minutes, 20 minutes of sawing, and it was exhausting, honestly. So yeah, I won't be using the Japanese pull saw for something like this again, circular saws all the way, even though I don't like it as much. That was done. What I wanted to do is give the edges a nice finish, so I wanted it to look a little bit more professional and also a little bit more comfortable when I'm leaning against it. Sharp edges are never conducive to comfort in workshops, so I took my roundover bit in the router and routed all the edges. Once that was done, I took my random orbital sander and basically went to town on the surface and on the sides and all the different edges. Now the surface came pretty smooth before I started sanding it, but I wanted to give it a nice smooth finish anyway, so I started working up through the grits. Now what that means is basically that I went from, I believe, 180 grit to 240 grit or 220 grit and then up to 320 grit. I thought that would be enough. If I wanted to make it even smoother, I can go up to 600 grit and even beyond that, but it was a little bit too much for the kind of purposes that this table will see. So once it was sanded, once it was completely sanded, essentially the construction for the workbench was finished. Now, any maker out there will tell you, if you're a maker, you will know you can never have enough electrical outlets in your workshop. You always need one more. So I have 2 electrical outlets at the end of the bench, but I decided to have even more. So I took one of them and extended it with a 6-plug extension, and I screwed it onto the face of the workbench, where basically I have it within reach and within easy access. Now there's a lot of controversy and safety concerns when using these sorts of extensions, and I understand, it's quite understandable as well. But for the most part, all I have is probably like a phone charging, perhaps, and at most 1 or 2 tools plugged in at the same time, but they will never be running at the same time. I never managed to use 2 tools at the same time. Now, obviously, the workbench will be used for a lot of different projects, including prop making, 3D printing stuff. So yes, it will have a lot of different uses. But the main reason I wanted such a large workbench, which is 2 meters by 1 meter, which is absolutely massive. I can't even reach the other side. It's awesome, honestly. It's longer than I am tall. Basically, what I wanted it for was for leatherworking. Now, for leatherworking, I usually have the hides or the sides, which are very long and they need a lot of space for me to sort of plan out stuff and also have multiple projects maybe at the same time and always have space to work on something. Now, for leatherworking, obviously, the first thing that I need, or at least the things that I need most, are my leatherworking tools. So I have my leatherworking station. I put it at the end of the workbench. But another thing which was bothering me in the past was that I always had to reach for the different spools of thread and then never finding the right one. So I decided to make a little bit of a spool holder. Now, instead of making one, I made a piece of wood, which basically can hold 9 3x3 spools. The way I did that was I took a scrap piece of plywood, marked out the proper distances and drilled holes at the appropriate points. I took a long piece of dowel, which is about 1 inch in diameter. I cut it into smaller fingers, basically finished it a little bit on the belt sander, just to make sure that it is a little bit smoother and so that the spools will fit in nicely without getting snagged. And I attached it to the back of my tool station. Now plywood is a little bit janky, and it does look a little bit janky, I admit it. But to be fair, for now it works. It will probably change it in the future to make it look a little bit closer in aesthetic. However, I started getting rid of some of the scrap pieces which I didn't need, and basically it cost me nothing because I had the wood for a very long time. I mean, you know, it was scrap anyway. With the completion of my workbench and the work tool station, having everything there at the ready, I moved on to the last pieces, which is the wall behind me. Now I had attached that panel, the sticker panel at an earlier time, but I decided to also have the clock, which was gifted to me by Leona Faye. I think she gave it to me in the very first Fools with Tools treasure trade, which is really awesome. Back then it was still called Board Studio, in fact. It's really awesome, and I really treasure that, so I really wanted it in my workshop, and I wanted to feature the background of my videos as well. I will have other gifts which I didn't have time to hang up because I didn't manage to model the hangers on time. Basically, I have hooks made by Otokiel. They are smithed by hand, hooks for LARPing and that sort of thing, but I will hang them probably on the wall as well. I don't intend on doing LARP anytime soon, at least. And also I have this really amazing Tron disc, which was turned with wood and glow-in-the-dark resin, which was made by Alan Scanell. I just received it last Christmas for the Foods with Tools treasure trade, and it's awesome. Honestly, I can't wait to really show you guys on video as well. Finally, those are not the only stickers I have. In fact, those are only from 2018. I've got the 2019 batch, which is much larger than that needs to be hung up. It probably will go up there as well on the wall. I just need to find the right fitting place for it, and also any future stickers which I will receive from other makers, because I'm always reaching out to other makers to make new contacts, make new friends, because the maker community is just simply awesome. One last point of note is that I maximize on the kitchenette counter space. Basically, this whole space is for 3D printing and a little bit of prop working as I need. I've got my 3D printers at the end. I got a new, second-hand, bought DLP Creality printer. It basically uses resin. The other one is the FDM printer by Prusa. So I have been working them really hard. They're taking a well-deserved break at the moment. So yeah, that's very useful to have, and I have the rest of the counter space to finish the resin prints, to clean them, to remove the sprues, and then to cure them properly. I'm so excited to have finished this workbench and to start working in this workshop. Can't wait to make more videos and more projects to show you people over on YouTube. So yeah, I've really enjoyed making this video. It's been a long time coming. I can't wait to make more projects on this workshop and on this workbench. Yeah, I'm really itching to start. So if you have enjoyed watching this video, please consider clicking the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more of my videos. There are more videos on my channel, so be sure to give that a look. And in the meantime, I hope that, I'll see you around in the future again. As always, you can follow me on my social media pages, Facebook and Instagram, where I upload other videos. And before I go, I would like to give a shout out to my patrons over on Patreon, because this is the first project which I did completely funded by Patreon and the workbench, at least, not the workshop itself, but the workbench has been funded by Patreon, and thank you so much for supporting me. This goes out to you. So if there is anyone else there who would like to support me, Patreon is the way to do so, but even just liking and sharing this video will help me out a real lot. So thank you so much for doing so. And with that, I bid you adieu. I've got some projects to make. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time in this workshop.